Beautiful, funny, and with a mouth as foul as any sailor, Carole Lombard was the movie star men fell in love with. She had famous romances with leading men like William Powell and Clark Gable, and by her peak, she was earning a higher salary than the president. However, something seemed to be haunting the Profane angel, as she was known. Her mother took an interest in the occult and became devoted to practices like numerology. Pretty soon, the numbers foretold a devastating tragedy. Carole, being down to earth and not superstitious, took little notice of the prophecy. Horrifyingly, one cold night in 1942, it all came true, and the emotional torment that led to it was even more shocking than the accident itself. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries. Carole Lombard was born Jane Alice Peters on October 6, 1908, in a comfortable upper-middle-class neighborhood in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Her parents, Frederick and Elizabeth Knight Peters, came from prominent Fort Wayne families. Elizabeth, known as Bessie, was the daughter of Charles Knight, a man with major banking interests along the East Coast. When Bessie married Frederick, her father used his connections to secure Frederick a good job with the Horton Company, a local washing machine manufacturer. Jane Alice was the third child and only daughter in her family, with two older brothers, Frederick Jr. and Stuart. Growing up with her brothers, Jane Alice became a bit of a tomboy, preferring to run and play with them rather than sit quietly with a book. This was a characteristic she would take right through her life and career. As it turned out, the only thing that could make Jane Alice sit still was a movie, and unlike other little girls who might enjoy fairy tales and romantic dramas, Jane Alice loved action films. Her mother, who had once dreamed of being an actress, was supportive of this developing interest. This was unusual in Fort Wayne, where movies were often considered a lower-class form of entertainment. However, Bessie didn't care about others' opinions, and regularly took Jane Alice to the theater on Friday evenings. Lombard's early life was mostly uneventful until 1913, when a major flood hit Fort Wayne. The Peters home, situated on a hill above the St. Mary's River, was safe from the flood waters. In fact, it became a makeshift hub for volunteers working to keep the river waters at bay. With one of the few telephones in the area, the Peters house was also used to coordinate flood relief efforts. Young Lombard watched on as her mother managed the activities of those fighting the flood and those providing support. Her mother's instinctive desire to help others would rub off on Carole. In the year after the Fort Wayne flood, the Peters family were hit by a more personal tragedy. Frederick, who had already been injured in an industrial accident before his marriage to Bessie, suffered a serious injury that caused a permanent limp. More gravely, he had also incurred a traumatic brain injury that led to severe mood swings and headaches. Over time, these issues strained his marriage and family life. In 1914, Bessie decided to take what she called an extended vacation to California. She took the children out of their local school and packed up their belongings for the trip. They never returned to Fort Wayne. Bessie later called this move a Victorian divorce, where the couple remained married but lived separately. But it was a heartbreaking set of circumstances for the family. Although her father continued to support them financially after they moved to California, the family couldn't maintain the lifestyle they had in Indiana. To make matters worse, being from a broken home carried a lot of stigma in early 20th century America. Bessie quickly realized that while her maiden name held status in Fort Wayne, she was just another ex-wife in Los Angeles and was treated as such. Little is known about 6-year-old Lombard's feelings on leaving her home and father. She never discussed it publicly. Some critics and biographers believe this early family hardship gave her acting, even the comedic roles, a tragic depth that made her performances even more compelling. Moving to Los Angeles did increase her chances of being discovered as an actress, however. Astonishingly, this happened when she was just 12, playing baseball with her brothers and their friends on a quiet street in the city. Lombard was an average student at Virgil Mary Middle School, looking forward to a normal teenage life. However, director Alan Dwan changed all of that. He recalled the first time he saw her, saying, "Lombard was out there knocking the hell out of the other kids, playing better baseball than they were, and I needed someone of her type for this picture." In a moment most kids only dream of, a talent scout approached Lombard and her mother. He asked if Lombard could audition for the role of Monte Blue's little sister in the 1921 film A Perfect Crime. Naturally, both mother and daughter were thrilled by this opportunity. Lombard seemed unfazed by the experience. After 2 days of filming, she returned to Virgil Mary Middle School, finished her studies, and moved on to Fairfax High School. However, the acting bug had bitten her, and she continued to attend auditions. Her next big opportunity came in spring 1924 when she was crowned May Queen at Fairfax. This time, a talent scout for Charlie Chaplin, attending the school carnival, saw her on stage and approached her about a role in the Gold Rush. Although her screen test for the movie didn't go well, and she didn't get the part, it opened other doors for the 15-year-old. A representative from Pictogram Film Company saw this screen test and spotted some potential. They contacted her and talked to her about possibly signing her to a contract. Though she didn't get the contract, he did offer her some advice on how to break into the industry. He suggested her name was too plain for an actress and advised her to change it. Remembering a middle school tennis friend, she chose the name Carole, without an E, becoming Carole Peters at this point. Lombard kept pursuing acting jobs, now feeling determined to find a way into the movies. In October 1924, she finally signed a contract with Fox. It's unclear exactly how she came to the attention of studio head Winfield Sheehan, but it likely involved her mother contacting legendary Hollywood gossip columnist Luella Parsons. With this offer, Carole left high school with her mother's approval, but managed to graduate in 1927 through a special arrangement. While Fox thought Carole was a great first name for an actress, they weren't satisfied with Peters as her last name. Carole suggested Lombard, once more inspired by a family friend. Fox agreed and she became Carole Lombard. Though Lombard would soon be a Hollywood star, her early screen appearances were minor roles in B-grade westerns and adventure films. Her big break came in the spring of 1925 with her first leading role opposite Edmund Lowe in Marriage in Transit. The film gave her room to show off her acting talent, and critics praised her performance. Despite this, Fox decided not to renew her one-year contract, feeling she wasn't the right fit for their studio. The reason behind this was particularly brutal. She had been involved in an automobile accident at some point in the mid-1920s. Details are hazy on when exactly it took place. Lombard was out on a date with a man named Harry Cooper when he crashed their car on Santa Monica Boulevard, shattering the windshield. She wasn't seriously hurt, but suffered a deep cut on her left cheek. The cut healed but left a scar, which some believe influenced Fox's decision to let her go. The crash also, perhaps unsurprisingly, ended her relationship with Cooper. Lombard and her mother then sued Cooper for $35,000 in damages, claiming the accident left her unable to work, costing her $300 a week. They eventually settled for $3,000. Teenage plastic surgery was rare in 1925, to say the least, but Carole hunted down Hollywood's best plastic surgeon to repair the scar. Though still slightly visible in later years, the surgeon did an excellent job, and she could cover it with makeup and clever lighting for the rest of her career. It seemingly never affected her again, and neither was she particularly self-conscious about it, making frequent self-deprecating jokes about her face. For the next year, after being dropped by Fox, Lombard struggled to find work in Hollywood. It seemed her early success might have been nothing more than fleeting. She persistently visited studios and was willing to try out for anything. Taking a risk, she auditioned for Max Sennett, Hollywood's king of comedy, who gave her the daring nickname Carole of the Curves. This name not only put all of the attention on her figure, but also cleverly shifted attention away from her facial scar. Her determination paid off when she was offered a position as a Sennett bathing beauty. Sennett then decided she had the chops to act in his popular comedy films. At first, Carole thought slapstick comedy was both difficult and undignified. However, she soon realized she had a knack for it. Between September 1927 and March 1929, she appeared in 15 short films for Sennett. These roles provided her with valuable public exposure and introduced her to comedy acting. She enjoyed making people laugh and later described her time with Sennett as, quote, the turning part of my acting career. Interestingly, she was sometimes credited as Carole with an E in these films, even though she didn't legally adopt this spelling until 1936. It's likely these early credits were mistakes, but they may have influenced a later change in her name. About a year into her stint with Sennett, his company, Pathé Exchange, began casting her in full-length films. After a minor role in Power, she played Blonde Rosie in Me Gangster. This led to a bigger part in Show Folks, where she portrayed a gold-digging vaudeville actress named Cleo. Her performance was well received, earning her another role, this time playing Ginny in Ned McCobb's daughter. These successes led to her first major breakthrough in High Voltage. In this film, which was also her first talkie, she played a young woman stranded with an oddball group during a snowstorm. While High Voltage gave Lombard a dramatic role, her next film, Big News, was another comedy. Starring opposite Robert Armstrong, she received excellent reviews and audiences found her charming, but now she was really developing her comedic talent. She reunited with Armstrong in The Racketeer in 1929. A critic wrote, "Carole Lombard proves a real surprise and does her best work to date. In fact, this is the first opportunity she has had to prove that she has the stuff to go over." Others started to see her potential too. In 1930, Fox reconsidered their decision and cast her in The Arizona Kid. They were betting on the film's success as it featured their big star, Warner Baxter. Lombard was given third billing, a sign they thought her talent to be strong enough to play alongside Baxter. The film succeeded, earning her praise from critics and the public, but Fox still didn't offer her a contract, a choice they would soon regret. When Fox hesitated, Paramount stepped in, signing Lombard for $350 a week. They quickly cast her opposite Buddy Rogers in Safety in Numbers. One critic praised her performance, saying, "Lombard proves an ace comedienne." In Fast and Loose, starring alongside Miriam Hopkins, Paramount mistakenly spelled her name with an E in the credits, just like some of the Sennett films had done in the past. Though assured it would be corrected, Lombard liked the look and decided to keep it. From then on, she was credited as Carole Lombard with an E, although the official change didn't happen for years. When rumors circulated that she added the E for numerology reasons, Lombard dismissed them, saying, "That's a lot of bunk." But her mother had found herself drawn to the burgeoning esoteric scene in California back in the 1920s, and had become a devotee of Baha'i philosophy and numerology. Carole may have dismissed it, but her mother thought the addition of the E was numerologically beneficial. Curiously, this numerology connection would resurface in a tragic way years later. In 1931, Lombard threw herself into the demanding life of an actress, making 5 films in 1 year. The first was the comedy It Pays to Advertise, where she played Mary Grayson, a secretary involved in a comical plan with her boss's son. Next, she starred opposite Paramount's leading man, William Powell, in Man of the World and Ladies' Man. Lombard and Powell had great chemistry both on and off screen, as later events would reveal. In her next film, Up Pops the Devil, Lombard took on a more mature role as Mary, the wife of a struggling writer who becomes a Broadway dancer to support him. Her final film of 1931 was I Take This Woman, where she played Kay Dowling, the urban wife of Gary Cooper's cowboy character. She begins planning to divorce him because of her city lifestyle, but she ultimately realizes her love for him, leading to a classic Hollywood happy ending between 2 mismatched lovers. In 1932, Lombard continued her busy schedule, making 5 more movies. The first 2, No Man's Land and Sinners in the Sun, were both critical and commercial failures. Her third film, Virtue, fared better. She played May, a fast-talking New Yorker, opposite Pat O'Brien's character, Jimmy Doyle, a cabbie she cheated on but later fell for. They navigate various troubles before finding their happy ending. Lombard returned to drama in No More Orchids, playing a spoiled heiress named Annie Holt, who has to deal with an arranged marriage to save her father's bank. Her 5th film, No Man of Her Own, was her only movie with Clark Gable. Lombard played librarian Connie Randall. Her character was set up in another opposites attract scenario, with Gable's conman Babe Stewart. Even though they had plenty of lust-filled scenes, Lombard later claimed that there was no romantic chemistry between them. She said, "We did all kinds of hot love scenes, and I never got any kind of tremble out of him at all. There were even rumors of clashes on set between the stars, but it seemed to be in good spirits. In fact, they exchanged humorous gifts at the end of filming. Gable gave Lombard ballet shoes with a note saying, 'To a true prima donna,' and she appraised his talents as an actor by giving him a giant ham with his face pictured on it." The critics praised the film, with one stating it was arguably Carole Lombard's best performance to date. In 1933, Lombard took on more dramatic roles. She starred as Collie Tanner in From Hell to Heaven, a woman determined to win a horse race bet. She then appeared in her only horror film, Supernatural, which was not well received. In The Eagle and the Hawk, she played a character known only as the Beautiful Lady. Then, in Brief Moment, Lombard portrayed Abby Fane, a nightclub singer married to a wealthy playboy. She played another nightclub singer in White Woman, opposite Charles Laughton's character Horace Prynne, her jealous and cruel husband. Despite making many films, Paramount seemed unsure of how to best utilize Lombard's talents, as evidenced by these very diverse roles. She had avoided being typecast, but also hadn't found her niche. In 1931, after their 2 pictures together, Lombard had fallen in love with and married her co-star, William Powell, who was Paramount's top actor at the time. Lombard, a fan of Powell before they met, once said, "Bill Powell is the only intelligent actor I've ever met." Their relationship puzzled many. Lombard, who at 22 was 16 years younger than Powell. She was known for her wild behavior and blunt language, while Powell had a reputation for being quiet and intellectual. She did not hide their differences. Lombard described their relationship as a perfect seesaw love. "We were just 2 completely incompatible people." Nonetheless, Lombard and Powell remained close friends. She would be at his side when he lost his wife, Jean Harlow, just a few years later, and you can hear all about the life of William Powell in episode 8, linked on screen now. Returning to single life, Lombard dove back into her social scene, frequently attending parties at the Coconut Grove. During one of these nights out, she met singer Russ Columbo. They instantly fell in love. Unlike her marriage to Powell, Lombard and Columbo were the same age and had similar lifestyles, which made them a perfect match. Many thought they would marry, but fate had other plans. In September 1934, Columbo visited his friend Lansing Brown to take some publicity photos. While they were looking at Brown's firearm collection, a gruesome accident occurred. Brown accidentally discharged an antique dueling pistol. The ball hit a table, ricocheted, and struck Columbo in the left eye, the same side that Lombard had injured in her car accident. Columbo was rushed to the hospital where doctors tried desperately to save him and remove the ball that had penetrated his brain. After 6 hours of surgery, Columbo died. He was only 26. At Columbo's funeral, Lombard paid a touching tribute. Knowing his favorite flowers were white gardenias, she made sure everyone wore one. However, his mother was notably absent from the service. Just days before his death, Columbo's mother had suffered a heart attack. Fearing the news would be too much for her, Lombard and Columbo's siblings decided not to tell her about his death. Lombard visited her weekly, reading letters she had written as if they were from Russ. For the remaining 10 years of her life, Columbo's mother never learned about the tragic accident that claimed her son's life. Above all, Carole was known for her generosity and dedication to the well-being of others. Her close friend and tennis coach recalled telling Lombard about Alice Marble, a tennis player struggling with her health. Lombard reached out to Marble, lifting her spirits during her illness and arranging for her to see a new doctor. This doctor provided a second opinion that helped save Marble's career, all before Lombard and Marble had ever even met in person. After finally meeting, Carole attended most of Marble's matches to support her. Marble went on to win multiple Grand Slam titles, a feat she might not have achieved without Lombard's help. 1934 was both Lombard's busiest and most successful year as an actress. She threw herself into her work to cope with her grief over Columbo's death. The year started with the release of Bolero, where she played a nightclub dancer opposite George Raft. Lombard had turned down the chance to star with Gable again, and it happened one night, possibly because she felt they lacked chemistry in their previous film together. While she might have later regretted the decision, she enjoyed showing off her dancing skills with Raft. The film did well and led to her next project, We're Not Dressing. In this film, Lombard starred alongside Bing Crosby, George Burns, Gracie Allen, and the iconic Ethel Merman. The movie was a major hit with audiences and critics, and 30 years later it inspired the much-loved television series, Gilligan's Island. Lombard landed one of her most iconic roles thanks to a bit of nepotism. Her second cousin, director Howard Hawks, saw her at a party where she was, she admitted, rather inebriated. He later remarked that her hilarious and uninhibited behavior was perfect for his new film, 20th Century. This role finally gave Lombard the stardom and recognition she had been searching for her entire career. She was cast as diva Lily Garland, who has a romantic history with John Barrymore's character, Oscar Jaffe. Initially, Hawks worried he might have made a mistake as Lombard struggled with the role. However, he continued to guide her, encouraging her to relax and interpret the character in her own way. His coaching paid off, and Barrymore praised Lombard as the finest actress I have ever worked with, bar none. Lombard herself was astonished by her transformation, telling a reporter, "In the rushes of 20th Century that I have seen, I hardly recognize myself. I certainly am not the Carole Lombard of the past 4 years." The change didn't go unnoticed. One critic wrote, "Lombard is like no other Lombard you've seen before. When you see her, you'll forget the rather stilted Lombard of old. You'll see a star blaze out of this scene, high spots Carole never dreamed of hitting." Another critic added, "She vibrates with life and passion, abandon and diablerie." After mastering her role, Lombard and Hawks had some fun on set. The sexually aggressive Columbia Pictures executive Harry Cohn frequently made advances toward Lombard, which was frustrating her. She and Hawks devised a plan to embarrass him. One day while Hawks was in Cohn's office, Lombard burst in exclaiming, "I've decided to say yes," and pretended to start stripping off her clothes. Hawks pretended to be outraged, saying, "I'd better get out of here if this is the kind of studio you run," and left. Cohn was so shocked that he asked Lombard to leave the office and never bothered her again. Depression-era audiences were looking for some comedic relief, and so they adored 20th Century. In her final film of 1934, The Gay Bride, Lombard played a gangster's moll, a role quite different from her previous ones. Starring with Chester Morris, the film was not well received by critics or audiences. She followed this with another dance film with George Raft, Rumba, released in 1935 to further mixed reviews. The success of 20th Century and the response to her subsequent films helped Lombard realize her true strength was in comedy. Many were impressed by Lombard's comedic timing and her willingness to often play the ditzy blonde. Desi Arnaz, a man more than familiar with comedy and women, remarked, "Carole had a quality which is rare. You can count the women who have had it on the fingers of one hand. Carole, while doing the wild antics of a clown, could make you laugh, and yet at the same time make you want to go to bed with her." Director Mitchell Leisen agreed, recalling, "We called her the Profane Angel, because she looked like an angel but swore like a sailor. She was the only woman I ever knew who could tell a dirty story without losing her femininity." In 1935, Lombard starred in her second screwball comedy, Hands Across the Table, about a poor manicurist trying to marry a wealthy man. She played opposite newcomer Fred McMurray, and remembering the help she received early in her career, Lombard took the time to mentor him in comedy. They worked well together, and the film's success led to them being paired in 3 more movies. Lombard and McMurray reunited for The Princess Comes Across, where she played an actress pretending to be a Swedish princess to win a film contract. Many saw this as a satire of Greta Garbo's career, but it was loved by critics and audiences alike. Though Garbo was known for her diva behavior, Lombard had a different reputation. She loved self-deprecating humor, once telling a reporter, "You ought to see the map for my face in the makeup department. It looks like a landscape of the moon." Although they had divorced a few years earlier, Lombard reunited with her ex-husband William Powell in the 1936 film My Man Godfrey. Universal Studios wanted Powell for the role of Godfrey, but he insisted that Lombard be cast as his co-star. He felt she was perfect for the role of Irene, an heiress who mistakenly believes Godfrey is homeless and hires him as her family's butler. Director Gregory LaCava, a longtime friend of Lombard, encouraged her to tap into her eccentric nature rather than giving strict directions. Lombard recognized the potential of this role and dedicated herself to perfecting every aspect of Irene's character. Her efforts paid off as My Man Godfrey received enthusiastic applause from both audiences and critics. The film was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, and Lombard earned her first and only nomination for Best Actress. Many critics still consider this her best performance, and it also elevated her status to that of a true headline actress in Hollywood. In 1936, Lombard collaborated with MacMurray again in Swing High, Swing Low, a drama that also allowed them to display their comedic skills. They portrayed cabaret performers struggling to balance their careers and relationships. While the film was well received, Lombard did not enjoy working on it as much as her previous comedies. With that in mind, she was looking for a new project when she learned that David O. Selznick had hired screenwriter Ben Hecht to create a role for her in Nothing Sacred. This film, co-starring Frederick March, was a satire on journalism with Lombard playing a small-town girl who fakes a fatal illness to gain attention. Directed by William Wellman, Nothing Sacred was the only color film Lombard made and one of her personal favorites. However, working with Frederick March was tough going due to his inappropriate behavior, something many of his female co-stars were forced to endure. Lombard, not one to be intimidated, devised a humorous retaliation. When March made advances once again, she invited him to her dressing room. When he excitedly arrived, she proceeded to reveal a prosthetic penis under her skirt. This, it seems, was an effective deterrent. Lombard later questioned whether she was suited for marriage, telling a reporter, "I think marriage is dangerous. The idea of 2 people trying to possess each other is wrong. I don't think the flare of love lasts. Your mind rather than your emotions must answer for the success of matrimony. It must be a friendship, a calm companionship which can last through the years." However, Lombard's views seemed to change a few years later. In 1936, she rekindled a connection with a former co-star. 4 years after their film, No Man of Her Own, Lombard and Clark Gable met again at a ball. This time, sparks flew. Gable rather boldly invited Lombard to his hotel room, to which she famously replied, "Who do you think you are, Clark Gable?" The attraction was instant and mutual. Gable then set about trying to get a divorce from his wife, Rhea Langham, who, although they had been separated for some time, Langham initially refused to grant it. As Gable and Lombard's relationship grew more serious, Langham realized her husband would not return to her. She agreed to the divorce in exchange for an eye-watering $500,000 settlement. The divorce was finalized in March 1939, and Gable and Lombard married on March 29th in Kingman, Arizona, during a short break while Gable was filming Gone with the Wind. During their marriage, Lombard balanced her obvious admiration for Gable with blunt, often humorous remarks about their private life. She once told a reporter, "God knows I love Clark, but he's the worst lay in town." In 1937, Lombard starred in what many consider her funniest film, True Confession. This movie paired her once again with John Barrymore and Fred McMurray. Lombard and McMurray portray an odd couple. He is an honest but struggling lawyer, while she is a compulsive liar who is constantly in trouble. The plot thickens when she gets a job with a man who ends up dead, and she is charged with the crime despite her protests of innocence. Her husband defends her, believing she's guilty, leading to a series of comedic events as this boy who cried wolf scenario unfolds. Even after her acquittal, their troubles continue when Barrymore's character tries to blackmail them. Upon reading the script, Lombard predicted the film, quote, "smacked of a surefire success," and she was right. True Confession received rave reviews and drew large audiences. The film's popularity led Lombard's agent, Myron Selznick, to negotiate a new contract with Paramount, boosting her salary to $450,000 per year, more than 4 times President Franklin Roosevelt's annual earnings. When questioned about her high salary, Lombard pointed out that 80% went to taxes and expressed her willingness to pay, saying, "Every cent anybody pays in tax is spent to benefit him. There's no better place to spend it. I enjoy this country, and I really think I get my money's worth." Her remarks impressed President Roosevelt, who sent her a personal thank you note for her support and patriotism. Despite her pay raise, Lombard left Paramount in 1938 and made one of her worst films, Fools for Scandal, with Warner Brothers. The comedy was about a wealthy actress who meets a struggling chef in Paris. When she returns to London, he follows and becomes her cook, leading to a love triangle with her fiancé. Unfortunately, the script and on-screen chemistry were lacking, resulting in a flop. After the disappointment of Fools for Scandal, Lombard shifted her focus back to dramas. In 1939, she starred alongside Jimmy Stewart and David O. Selznick's Made for Each Other, portraying Jane Mason, the new wife of lawyer John Mason. Then in 1940, she played nurse Anne Lee in Vigil in the Night, a character wrongfully blamed for her sister's mistake, forcing her to leave a prestigious hospital job for a smaller country practice. Unfortunately, these films did not perform well, and her next project, They Knew What They Wanted, was even less successful. In this film, Lombard worked with Charles Laughton again, playing a middle-aged farmer named Tony. The movie was deemed too depressing and scandalous, and so it received poor reviews from critics and audiences. Following this string of failures, Lombard returned to comedy starring in Alfred Hitchcock's Mr. and Mrs. Smith. She and Robert Montgomery played a married couple who discover they are not legally wed. This unfolds in various comedic situations as they decide whether to stay together or part ways. With this movie, she was back on form and much in demand once again. While Lombard excelled as an actress, she also at this time embraced her roles as a wife and hostess at home. She and Gable never had children, which was an emotionally difficult aspect of their marriage. Lombard deeply wished to have a child with Gable, but after 2 miscarriages and numerous fertility treatments, they remained childless. Without the demands of a family, Lombard and Gable could enjoy their private life together during the rare breaks from their careers. Both enjoyed the outdoors, and shortly after their marriage, they bought a 20-acre ranch in Encino, California. This ranch became their sanctuary, away from the prying eyes of tourists and the movie-mad public. They often went on hunting trips and were known to be good shots, eating the meat they hunted themselves. They also kept barnyard animals, allowing Lombard to recreate some of her fondest childhood memories from Fort Wayne. Both Gable and Lombard loved hosting gatherings at their ranch, often inviting friends for weekends or longer stays. With the assistance of a small staff, Lombard enjoyed organizing dinner parties. Unlike many actresses of her time who aimed for a round-the-clock glamorous image, she preferred a more down-to-earth approach. She famously said, "I can't imagine a duller fate than being the best-dressed woman in reality. When I want to do something, I don't pause to contemplate whether I'm exquisitely gowned. I want to live, not pose." Raised in Los Angeles but born in Indiana, Lombard always retained an all-American persona. This was evident in her patriotic declarations, especially during the Depression. She surprised reporters by expressing a desire to make more films to earn more money and pay more taxes. She explained, "If I can give the government $250,000 a year, who's better off for it? Certainly I'm no worse off for working. Pardon me, did I say working? I mean for doing something like this instead of pouring coffee in a canteen." Although her personal life was far from monastic, Lombard had her own sense of reverence and belief in God, which was likely shaped by her early years in Sunday school. She described her faith as unique. "I don't seem to get solemn about it, and some people might not understand. That's why I never talk about it. I think it's all here, in the mountains and the desert. I don't think God is a softie either. In the end, it's better if people are forced back into being right, before they're too far gone. I think your temple is your everyday living." Given her patriotism and belief in self-reliance, it was no surprise that Lombard quickly became involved in war bond rallies after the United States entered World War II. In early January 1942, just weeks after the Pearl Harbor attacks, Lombard flew with her mother to Indiana for a war bond rally. These events were happening nationwide, with celebrities encouraging fans to buy government-issued bonds to support the war effort. Lombard excelled at this, raising a record-breaking $2 million in bond sales in a single evening. Her humor and gritty, down-to-earth persona seemed to resonate with people more than most Hollywood figures at this time, and at the very least, her love of cursing would surely have endeared her to the nation's sailors. Some rare outtake footage exists of Lombard swearing heartily with William Powell on the set of My Man Godfrey, which is particularly fascinating due to how far removed it seems from her character in the film.
I don't like that shit. it.
The first part was swell.
Yes, I know it was, but I stunk up
I
the...
must say that.
No, not only does it make me have something to think of. I got that far. Holy Jesus Christ.
Oh, what? Christ, where am I?
Hello, Godfrey.
Hey, you can put the groceries... Nuts. I'm fish.
Come on, quick.
As for the war, it seems she had passed over her mother's Baha'i-influenced theosophy, a quote from which was, "Woman will abolish warfare among mankind." Lombard was no pacifist, and she was doing all she could to support Allied victory. However, the war was about to come to her in a tragic and, some believe, direct way. Odo Winkler, Clark Gable's press agent, had accompanied Lombard and her mother on this record-breaking war bond tour. He had arranged for them to return to California by train. However, Lombard, eager to get back to Gable and start filming They All Kissed the Bride, suggested they fly home instead of taking the multi-day train journey. Winkler and her mother, both afraid of flying and with travel plans already set, were hesitant. Furthermore, her mother had had a startling premonition. Lombard's mother had never flown before and was terrified of boarding TWA Flight 3. Before the trip, a psychic had warned them to keep out of planes in 1942. There is danger in them for you. Lombard's mother was also very unsettled by the number 3s associated with the trip, from the flight number to the plane model to Lombard's age of 33. This convinced her it was a bad idea, but Carole insisted. Lombard convinced them to flip a coin to decide. She won, so the three boarded TWA Flight 3 at 4 a.m. on January 16th. Some of her most devoted fans, upon learning she would be flying from their local airport, followed her right to the runway. Before boarding, Lombard smiled and waved, saying, "Before I say goodbye to you all, come on and join me in a big cheer. V for victory." The flight proceeded smoothly from Indiana westward. However, during a refueling stop in Albuquerque, Lombard and her party were almost bumped to make room for servicemen. This incident is remarkably similar to the one that befell Donna Reed during the war. However, unlike Reed, Lombard was unwilling to give up her seat. Lombard insisted they stay on due to their work at the war bond rallies, resulting in other civilian passengers being removed instead. The flight continued to Las Vegas, where it landed and refueled on the evening of January 16th. It took off again at 7:07 p.m. Pacific Time. Tragically, 20 minutes later, the plane struck a high snowdrift on Potosi Mountain and crashed, killing everyone on board. The Army quickly secured the crash site, but reporters still flocked to the scene. One described it as a grim, sorrowful picture, with wreckage scattered over a 500-yard radius, and victims' belongings hanging from trees like, quote, macabre Christmas ornaments. Upon hearing the news of the crash, Gable flew to Las Vegas with Hollywood fixer Eddie Mannix. Gable joined the searchers at the crash site and was nearby when Lombard's mangled body was found. Her jewelry was recovered, but not her wedding ring. On January 18th, he returned to Los Angeles with the bodies of Lombard, her mother, and his friend Winkler. The Army, deeply saddened by Lombard's death, wanted to give her a full military funeral. However, Gable honored her wishes as stated in her will. "I request that no person other than my immediate family, and the persons who shall prepare my remains for interment, be permitted to view my remains after death has been pronounced. I further request a private funeral, and that I be clothed in white and placed in a modestly priced crypt in Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Glendale, California." Following her instructions, she was laid to rest accordingly, with a simple stone later added inscribed with Carole Lombard, Gable. Eulogies and tributes for Lombard poured in from across the nation within hours of her passing. Gable was profoundly affected by her death, plunging into deep depression. Despite completing his film Somewhere I'll Find You, he could not conceal his heartbreak and rapidly lost 20 pounds in weight. Actress Esther Williams noted that Gable was never the same after Lombard's death, saying his heart sank a bit. Gable confided to friends that he lost both his wife and his best friend that day. The Civil Aeronautics Board launched a full investigation into the crash of TWA Flight 3. They concluded that pilot error and the absence of beacon lights, which had been turned off to prevent Japanese attacks, were to blame. However, some found these explanations insufficient. Soon enough, other theories arose. Lombard, known for her staunch patriotism and pro-American stance, had made many enemies among the Axis powers. Director Orson Welles later shared that a security official told him Axis forces operating within the U.S. had shot down Lombard's plane, with the government covering it up to protect Americans of German descent. Furthermore, why was Lombard so determined to return home quickly from Indiana? Well, many believe it was because of Gable. At the time, he was filming with Lana Turner, and there were suspicions that Lombard feared Gable was unfaithful to her with Turner. They had argued before she left, and Lombard may have thought she was saving her marriage by hurrying home. This belief had a devastating impact on Gable, who, along with Turner, always denied any romantic connection between them. When Carole Lombard died, her final film, To Be or Not to Be, had just finished production and was in the post-production phase. This movie, which took a satirical look at the Nazis, also starred Jack Benny. Director Ernst Lubitsch decided to complete and release the movie with a few minor adjustments, notably removing Lombard's line, "What can happen on a plane?" which seemed eerily prophetic. Despite the intrigue generated by her untimely death, the film did not perform well at the box office. However, critics praised Lombard's performance, deeming it a fitting end to her brilliant yet sadly all too brief career. In the decades since Lombard's death, many actresses and celebrities have become more renowned for their scandals than for their contributions to society. Carole Lombard was no saint, and she would be the first to laugh, and possibly swear, at anyone suggesting she was. Her final days highlighted her serious commitment to her country, raising money for the war effort. This demonstrated that she was far from a simple stereotype. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and why not check out the additional benefits of becoming a Hollywood Mysteries member or joining our Patreon. That's all for this episode. Sweet dreams.